Okay, now the show's just on fire. I mean, wow. This episode 7, was so good that for the first time ever in this season, I have no worst list. I do have one small complaint, though, that I don't want to let Karen get away with, and then we'll get into my best list for episode 7. So what's the problem with Karen? Although I do feel a little bit bad for Karen, because I think clearly the sparks are flying between Matt and Elektra. But I think that her ulterior motives of meeting with Frank alone are pretty selfish and untrustworthy when it comes to, particularly Foggy, but also Matt, because they're supposed to be a team, and she should be working to make Frank Castle trust at least Foggy and have him in on the conversations, because she's not a lawyer. Even if Matt Murdock does think she should maybe consider law school, she's a reporter, Matt. Stop putting her on the wrong path. But I think that it's not appropriate for her to even be questioning Frank Castle. She really should be working to get at least her and Foggy in the room. So that was pretty bad. And I think Foggy should call her on it. But she doesn't really listen to him, so he should have Matt talk to her about it. All right, but maybe not after episode 7. But anyway, let's get into the top 5 things in the episode, because they are doozies. I really, wow. I mean, seriously, this episode is this season is now solidly on track. All right, so number 1. The Punisher. I loved his introduction in this episode. The way they had the jury interviews for jury selection, and clearly everyone's divided about how they feel about the Punisher. Some think he's a monster, some think he's a hero. And then they walk him in, and I have to say, his theme music, or whatever they played when he came into the courtroom, that can't make up its mind either, because that's either like a badass hero's music or like a sympathetic villain's music. But it was awesome. And then when they walked him in and then had him turn around and face forward in front of the American flag, brilliant! I thought it was so good, because it kind of shows like where America is as a country, like maybe, like especially right now, but maybe all the time, right? I mean, we love our guns here, take matters into your own hands, like a John Wayne kind of persona, and that can be viewed through a positive or negative lens, just like the Punisher. So the idea that the Punisher maybe represents America, and it's like the Purge kind of a little bit, although the Purge is obviously evil through and through, but still, it makes the idea of the Punisher much more sophisticated. I also really liked him unwilling to claim PSD, because it was disrespectful to people who actually had it. I thought that was really great. I mean, like, for all the talking he did on the roof in episode 3, and I know some of you enjoyed it, but some of you also agree with me that it was boring and trite and took too long. But I'm getting such a much better idea of what Frank is like from these conversations, like for him saying stuff like that, because you know what? I mean, come on, let's be honest. Frank isn't a really touchy-feely guy, right? I mean, his cemetery speech was beautiful, but for the most part, I think he's someone that you have to learn about, like, by observing him, or like trying to figure out what motivates him to say certain things, or examples of his behavior. And then also when you analyze him, I think that the analyzation of him in this episode was spectacular. All right, so we're getting ahead of ourselves. So 1, Punisher, amazing. He's just going to get even cooler. All right, so everyone says they want him to have his own show, his own series. I don't know, maybe he can show up in someone else's show. I mean, I'm not sure. I think I prefer the crossovers that are starting to happen, mentioning Jessica Jones, IGH potentially coming into play again. I think that's maybe the direction I'd be more interested in going. All right, so next, number 2, Foggy. Sorry. I'm so happy. Foggy is so cool this season. As you know, for most of season 1, not a fan. He kind of came around toward the end, but this season, he's a hero himself. I would liken him to Supergirl Alex Danvers as just being a non-superpowered or non-vigilante kind of character who's just really heroic in his own right. I love that he's lead counsel. He has to be, because obviously Matt is not reliable enough, as demonstrated in this very episode. I also thought that he did I knew he was going to throw the cards down and just speak from the heart. I was like, we all know what you're going to do, Foggy. But then I guess, again, Foggy doesn't know that he's on a television show. But I thought that what he had to say, his opening remarks, that was a great depiction of Frank and what happened to Frank. And I know that Karen led him there to some degree, but Foggy did a great job of summing it up for the jury. I think he made a very compelling opening statement about it wasn't the war that broke Frank, but it was the loss of his family, which was so strong to him, so important that was his lifeline in battle. I think that was very, very good, and that he had to take matters into his own hands because the justice system failed him, both law enforcement and the legal system. So I thought that was really, really, really strong stuff. So I loved it. Although, if you watch People versus O.J. Simpson, he's got to add a little more flourish. I love what Johnny Cochran's talking about narrative and telling a story and getting the jury's attention. Because the jury, even here, the reason I said that is the jury seems super bored. But that wasn't Foggy's only chance to shine during this episode. I loved his response to Matt's lie about Elektra. I just said in the last episode, that's going to come back and haunt Matt, that it was a step too far, and Foggy agreed. He was like, I can't believe you lied again. It really was a mean thing to do, and I think Matt's going to have to work very hard to rebuild that trust. And I think that it was really great. Matt is so lucky to have a friend actually like Foggy who tells him like it is. He has two people who do that, the priest and also Foggy. And I think, maybe that's why I haven't seen the priest so much this season, because Foggy's taken on that role. And he was really right to say, nobody makes you do anything, Matt. They might, you might have temptation, but everybody does. But these are choices that ultimately you are making. And I thought the way he said, he talked about, your decision to go out and fight crime when you have to deliver opening remarks in the morning. I mean, although he didn't, we'll talk about Elektra's give and take there a little bit in just a moment. That's my number 4. But I just thought that Foggy was great. And Matt, again, as I said, is so lucky to have someone like him, being honest with him. People who try and make you feel better about yourself aren't doing you any favors. All right, you don't want someone who's going to be cruel to you and like overly critique you, but you really need someone to be honest with you. And when you do have a flaw, to point it out, because how else are you going to? I mean, you don't want to be making mistakes. All right, so anyway, that's number 2. Number 3. There were a lot of great conversations during this episode. A lot of great conversations. But I thought that the Catholicism one deserved its own section because, for all the talk on the roof, Punisher couldn't get Matt to say this, but Karen, he did hear. And it was really quick, but it was such a brilliant thing that he said, and it put so much insight into him as an individual. And he even said to her, I'm a Catholic lawyer. But he said the only people who get to decide who dies are God and sometimes the jury. And that was really fantastic. That was such a great distilled, look at what Daredevil's sense of justice is, that it was really impressive. It was like Daredevil Cliff Notes. I was like, oh, thank you. And I loved it. And I loved the way he reacted to Karen having a different ideological standpoint, because stuff like that does drive friends. It does drive couples apart. And I'm glad he was honest about it. Although let's be also honest, and then I think he's having very strong feelings for Elektra, and the timing is very bad for his new relationship with Karen. So he's hitting a rough patch with Karen, and it's easier for him to be like, I don't want to deal with this, because he's like, he can fall back on Elektra. All right, so let's go to Elektra and Matt. Wow. What an episode for the two of them. I loved their date, in the middle of the episode when they decided to look into that crate or that shipment. So fantastic. Okay, let's just go through the awesomeness of their interactions in this episode. I have my notes. I thought it was so cute when she was out of breath, and she's like, oh, the good stuff leaves you breathless. And he's like, I'm glad to hear you say that, because more people were coming. And then he laughed and smiled at her really touchingly and pulled her mask up for her. It was adorable. I loved it so much. I was like, if I was like Elektra's best friend, I'd be like, he likes you so much. You're so lucky to have that. Wow. I'm sure inside she was like, squee. So I loved it. Then, although I love the fact that she almost killed someone and she said it's your lucky day. I mean, we're seeing shades of what Elektra will become. Other hints as well when we get to the final best thing about the episode. But I thought that was good. I mean, they're being very true to the character, so I like it. She has direction. I think Elektra has matured, so I will officially say now that I am on Team Elektra, right? I mean, I think it's a team that's pretty hard to pass up, as Matt himself is finding to be the case. Then when they went back to the apartment, if I was Elektra, I would think he was totally into me, because why is he shirtless? He has a girlfriend. If you have a girlfriend and you're with another girl, you have to put a shirt on. I don't care how hot it is, or if you just took down what you think are Yakuza, you gotta put a shirt on. I mean, Karen would be, that would be the damning thing. Like, up until the shirtless point, he can be like, we're co-workers. We were unwinding. We were comparing notes about after what happened in our fight and what we're gonna do next. But this is like, the girlfriend talk, being like, but why do you have your shirt off, right? I mean, like, that's where he just totally loses the argument. And also, I don't know, I mean, I'm sure, as you can see, Elektra had a hard time concentrating, as I'm sure everyone who watched the episode, who is attracted to men, felt the same way, right? Just being, I mean, someone actually tweeted me and said, there's so much shirtlessness in this season, and I was like, it is pretty awesome. All right, so anyway, I thought that was great, but was even... They also did the old Scar comparison, which actually was done in Lethal Weapon, one of the old Lethal Weapon movies a while ago. Rene Russo and Mel Gibson had like the very same give and take, but this led to a great reveal, which we shall discuss in just a moment. I'm talking about Nobu, not the restaurant, the evil ninja. All right, so anyway, I thought it was so romantic, when he went to sleep, falling asleep to the sounds of her breathing. I was like, wow, that was a good one. That was like superhero hardcore romance. I loved it. Like, it was still loyal to the superhero genre, but it was just like, wow, right? Like, you're approaching like I don't know. I don't even, like, I was like thinking like the best romance novels, I guess we'll say. But I just really thought it was so sweet. Like, wow, like swoon. Then also I wanted to point out that Elektra, did a good job here. I mean, she's very smart at manipulating people, both in a malicious way and in just in a wanting to get what she wants way. But when she said to Matt, I left because you deserved better than me, I don't know if that's true. I think Elektra has a very high opinion of herself. I don't think Elektra feels that way at all. I think Elektra felt that was the only play to make him forgive her for leaving him like that. Being like, I left you because I loved you too much. I was like, Elektra, your game is strong. And it worked. He then was like, I'm going to sleep. I was like, Matt, you have a bed right over there. Why don't you go sleep in your bedroom? But instead he wanted to sleep to the sounds of not her snoring, but her sleeping. I also loved when she came back, and I loved her line, finish your homework, I'll do recon. That was spectacular. She has some great lines, and Elodie Young does a great job delivering them. And I love that she went and took care of the medical examiner on her own. She took her own initiative. I thought that was great. And I also really liked that she got upset with Matt Murdock for being upset with her about that. Like after he took out the guards in front of the building at the very end, and he was like, you gonna help me? And she said, you said you didn't want it. And I was like, oh, good one. I mean, he's having a lot of lady problems at both places of work. It's hilarious. It's so good. That was a good burn from Elektra. I like Elektra a lot now. All right, so finally, Nobu. Gotta talk about Nobu. She knows Nobu. She knows Nobu personally. She covered it. Not that great. I'm surprised that Matt didn't pick up on it, but I guess he was too busy being like, I'm shirtless. Do you think it's working? Because that's an intentional move on his part as well. Let's face it. But she totally knows who Nobu is. I think she maybe didn't know that he'd run into Matt Murdock before. I think Nobu's probably lying to her as well. But I think that, this isn't a spoiler because it's from the comics. So we'll see if the show lines up with it. But Elektra got training from the hand. I even said, she was so out of control, in one of my earlier reviews of the season, she was so out of control in college that she should go to the hand. It's like, let's admit it. Let's be honest, Elektra, you need some guidance in your life. So I think that maybe that's how she felt too. Maybe she was like, I'm all over the place. I'm a hot mess. So she went to the hand, and maybe Nobu trained her to some degree. And I think she knows that they're fighting the hand. I don't think she thinks it's Yakuza. I think that's something she's telling Matt. We'll see if I'm right, but that's what my instincts tell me. I don't think Matt really has any instincts. But at the end of this episode, I honestly was like, wow, you're being used so hardcore, Daredevil. It's ridiculous. You are basically have been turned into Elektra's henchman. And the fact that you don't recognize that is all kinds of problems for you. If you were talking to Foggy about this, he would point it out to you because it's very obvious to any third party. But I think that someone told me there's a big reveal at the end of episode 8. My guess is it's Nobu. All right, so that's my review of episode 7. Let's see if they can keep this streak going and if we can drop the worst list permanently. We'll see. That I've never seen a show do that yet. They've been able, more than a one-off. So far, the only shows that I've ever done reviews for that didn't have a worst list were the latest episode of Supergirl, I believe episode 16, and then this episode of Daredevil. But both were darn good quality television. All right, look forward to continuing the conversation down below, and I'll see you after episode 8.